James, and today I'm going to talk about how to make friends and lose money. This is chapter 7 of a crowdfunder strategy guide, which I will be talking about today. This is a book that I wrote back in 2014, and today I will be talking about it in reference to what I've learned since then, what's going on in 2022 in reference to some of these topics. We're going to talk about the concept of creators eating last, about, I'm looking at my other computer screen here, about early bird rewards, fulfillment plans, transparent updates, and Kickstarter exclusives. If you have any questions while you're watching this, feel free to let me know. I will just talk until you have any thoughts or ideas that you want to share. So the whole concept of the chapter, how to make friends and lose money, goes into this idea of leaders eat last, which is a concept described by author and speaker Simon Sinek, who talks about, I think the example he gives in the chapter is about how people in the military, leaders in the military, wait until the people that they're not their followers, but the officers, the people that they lead. What do they call it? The Marines. The officers eat last. The officers wait till everyone else eats, and whatever's left, that's what the officers eat. So this is kind of the opposite of the hierarchy that we see in society a lot, where the person who's in charge, that they are put at the forefront, that they get to get the best cut of whatever it is. Whereas this idea of true leadership is letting everyone else go first. And the way that I applied this in the book to crowdfunding is that this concept of when you have a successful crowdfunding campaign, you raise all this money, hopefully a lot of money, so you can make the product, make the rewards for your backers. That money might feel like a lot of money in your bank account, but really it is not. It's not even real money yet. It's not your money. It doesn't really become your money until you have fulfilled the promise to your backers. And so it goes back to this idea in the book that I talk about a lot of putting your backers first. Prioritize those funds for your backers. And this is a little bit pedantic for me to say, I have to admit, looking back, because who am I to tell you what to do with your money, right? I mean, but this is a philosophy that I really believe in, that I try to embrace during the crowdfunding campaigns that I ran, where that money went solely to the creation of the rewards. I didn't try to use that money for anything else, especially not for my own personal enjoyment. I think there is profit to be made on Kickstarter and crowdfunding platforms. It's there. But I think that profit only comes after you have successfully made the product and sent it to backers. After that, if you still have some money left over, and hopefully you've calculated so you do have some money left over, that's when the creators get to eat. That's when you get to enjoy the fruits of all your labor, financially at least. Hopefully you've enjoyed them up to that point. And I still, looking back at this concept in 2022, I still fully embrace it. Like even though I run our pre-order campaigns at Stonemaier Games differently these days, this concept of putting customers first, and then hopefully having some profits left over afterward and enjoying those profits in some way. I still believe in that. Looks like George is joining me for the conversation today. He says, one must be very disciplined when dealing with backers' money. Totally agree. Yeah, it does take discipline, because if you raise $100,000 on your campaign and you have $90,000 of that show up in your bank account, you will feel like for a moment that you have $90,000, but you don't really, because most of that money is going to go towards making and shipping the product. So yeah, that's a concept I talk about here. I don't think that's my opinion on that hasn't changed over the years. I think the thing that may have changed a little bit is the concept of profit. That I do think it's okay for creators to profit from all their hard work. Whereas I think in some of my older, my earlier days, really, I wasn't all about that. I was kind of in favor of pricing everything just for the bare minimum so you could make it and ship it. But I think that's dangerous because you need a buffer to ensure that all the uncertainties that happen, they can change that formula that you budgeted for. And also, I think if you put a lot of work into something, that you deserve to profit from it. I think that's part of the benefits of making something awesome. Yeah, you make a lot of people happy, but also you gain some money that hopefully you can use to live your life. I think that's important. A lot of creators use a lot of time. Your time is worth money. Speaking of money, Let's talk about the first of two controversial topics in the chapter that my thinking has evolved quite a bit over the years. The first is our early bird pledges. So talk about this on page 110 in my edition here. Talk about early bird rewards. So the original version of early bird rewards, we don't see them quite as much anymore, was that for any backer that showed up, say, within the first 24 hours. So if you back the project within the first 24 hours, the first 48 hours, that they would get something that the other backers would not get. Say an upgraded first player token. So even in times, and it's a cool concept because that first 24 hours, 48 hours is so important for your project, right? However, by focusing on those backers that get that special thing, you are essentially saying that all of the other backers that show up to support the campaign and help bring your product to life, or whatever you're trying to create, bring your creation to life, are less valuable than those people who show up in the first 24 to 48 hours. And in some ways, I understand that philosophy. I understand the importance of that first day or so, especially launch day. But I don't like the idea of separating people into groups of saying this type of person, this person who showed up 3 days later, who didn't even hear about the project in advance, that they're worth less, that they deserve less than that person who showed up early. And one of the earliest concept of early bird rewards, one that I actually used on an early project, was offering a different price for a limited number of rewards and then increasing the price for everybody else after a certain point. So say like the first 100 rewards are $35, the next, all the other remaining rewards are $40. And I really don't like this strategy at all in hindsight. I think there's so many better ways to encourage people to back early and to support your project early than early bird rewards. And I think they can really, really hurt a project because they essentially disincentivize anyone who comes to the project like a day late, even during the campaign, during the first week of the campaign. They see that if they had known about it, that they would have saved $5-10 on it, and they're going to definitely be significantly less likely to back their project now. So I highly discourage creators from doing that. I talk about the concept of winners and losers in the book. And I talk about, I'll go back to, I've said this many times, but the importance of building the community and building awareness of the campaign before you launch. I think that's the best way to invite people to back the project on day one, to get them excited about the thing that you're creating, to share it openly and widely for a long time so people can be really excited to be among those who help create it on day one. Jasmine is joining us from New Zealand. She says, "So nice to catch live. Thank you for always being so inclusive. It's nice to see you inspiring others with this kind spirit." Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, and this is part of that, inclusivity, this concept of including the day 3, the day 4, the day 20 backer in the same way that you're including the backers that show up in the first few hours, the first few days. I think that has a hugely positive impact on the campaign when you try to include everyone during the campaign. Now, I do think that there is a difference between a backer and a pre-order customer. So if you have a 20-day campaign and you offer the product for $40 during that time, I think that is different than someone who shows up afterward, even though they just didn't hear about it. But at that point, you've worked with all these people to create this thing. Like, they would not exist if your campaign was not successful. And now you're able to make more because of those people. And I think that's the point in time where it is okay to charge a little bit more. I think that's fair game, totally. And I think most people don't hold that against the creator to charge a little bit more afterwards, or even a lot more, because the point of creation is over at that point. The scale of this will or will not exist has passed. This thing will exist now because your campaign funded, and now here's the price. Here's the price that you're going to charge everyone else. George is talking about exclusives. I'm going to talk about exclusives in a minute, George. Garrett says, do you distinguish between early bird exclusive rewards versus early bird pricing? I've noticed a lot of pre-order campaigns that will have additional discount for a few days, which I don't mind if I miss out on. Yeah, so that's a good question, because something that we do at some of our games now, we have our pre-orders, and during the pre-order window for the first 4 or 5 days, we do offer a better price than later. But the reason we do that is because we start shipping right away. And so we want to give people a reason to just to support the product, so that we can start shipping it to them right away. Now, I guess an argument could be made that, I mean, why are we offering a better price to those within the first 4 days than the person who learns about the product 4 or 5 days later? I think that's fair. I think I totally hear that. And usually I don't raise the price much after that. I usually just raise it by a few dollars. But yeah, I don't know. I'm talking out loud here. I think that is. I don't know. You're not actually criticizing that, Garrett, but I think that's something that we could consider in the future. But yeah, I think it is a little bit different in Kickstarter, where you haven't created the thing yet, versus for Stillmeyer Games, we've been talking about it for a month. And so that's like the essential, like, we've done all the things that you would do during a Kickstarter campaign. We've talked about it. We revealed all the stuff. We've declared that we're already making it and that we've already made it. And now there's a period of time where people can get that special price. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it is a little bit different than a Kickstarter campaign. Kevin says, I think Arcane Wonders does a special reward with a pledge for people who sign up to be notified in a mailing list. I like this option. Yeah, I think that's also different as well, Kevin. I think that's a great example. I've seen a number of different companies like Thundergrift do this in a really interesting way. And GameFound even enables it for backers and creators to say, okay, if you signed up for a notification, a launch notification, and you actually back the campaign, that you get the special bonus. I think that's different because there's, again, an extended period of time. I think it's typically about the timing, like how much of this is about something happening within a very short, tight window versus a longer extended period of time where people have been able to learn about the project, to sign up for it. I think that is a little bit different. I think that's a great strategy. I've also seen the other twist on early birds that I do like is that if you reach a certain funding level or backer level within the first 24 to 48 hours, that you unlock something for everyone. So it feels a little bit more like a stretch goal, but you kind of position it as an early bird, where you say, okay, if we have enough backers during this time, during this first early period, that everyone benefits, not just those who showed up during this time. And I think that can feel great. I think that's kind of a win-win, because if you showed up early, that feels good because you were part of it, you get the thing, and you get to help out everyone else who didn't discover it on day 1 or day 2. Let's see. George says, does the pre-order notification help in any way for fulfillment? Is there a relationship between the two? The pre-order notification. Not necessarily. No. I see what you're saying, George. So when we ask people to sign up for a launch notification for a product, does that help with our fulfillment plan? And in the case of Stillmeyer Games, almost never, no, because by the time that we've announced a product, there's usually only about a few weeks between that and when we start the pre-order and when we start to ship the product a few days after that. And so by then, the product has already either arrived at fulfillment centers or it's very, very close to arriving. So it doesn't impact our plan. That would be kind of nice, but that would greatly expand the window of time that we would need to between announcement and when we can actually ship. All right, I'll read Garrett's comment before I move on to the next topic of the fulfillment plan. We're talking about fulfillment here. George is helping me segue. Garrett says, I agree it's different and goes back to your point about people showing up early to help get a campaign off the ground, whereas folks down the road might pay a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's part of we're making this thing exist together, whereas for Stillmeyer Games and companies running true pre-order campaigns, they've already made the product. Garrett says, I take issue with exclusive physical rewards for sure, but missing out on a little discount doesn't feel exclusionary to me for whatever reason. Yeah, let's talk about exclusives in a minute. Fulfillment. So I go into one of the stories that I tell in this chapter that I often forget happened, but when I wrote this book, really when I was running my campaign for viticulture, after the campaign for viticulture, the concept of hub-based worldwide fulfillment didn't really exist then. Like, companies were doing it, but crowdfunders weren't really doing it. And I didn't even really think of it. I was talking to a friend, kind of a business mentor who mentioned the idea to me that we should consider doing that for viticulture. And that really spawned what we know today as the standard fulfillment system for products around the world for crowdfunders. That instead of shipping everything wherever you make it, say you make everything in China and you ship it over to the US and then you ship it from US parcel shipping around the world. That's how it used to work. But after viticulture, this hub-based system took off where you'd make something in China and you'd ship a certain number of copies to Canada or the US or Australia and to Europe. And then from there, they shipped from within those regions. So I doubt we were truly the first, but I was the first to really, really talk about it. And that has really taken off over the years, where we see companies that exist now for that purpose, fulfillment companies that exist specifically to be that hub within a region. And I think that's hugely important. I talk about in this chapter, top 10 ways to prepare your product for worldwide fulfillment. Let's see if there's anything specific that I want to jump into here. I think one of the biggest things is to have a plan before you launch your product. Still see too many campaigns, I think, where they say, we'll figure out fulfillment afterwards. This is like live campaigns that say, we'll figure it out afterwards. But I think it's so important to have a rough idea of which fulfillment centers you are going to partner with during the campaign itself. And also I mentioned in the chapter to have a distribution plan, if possible, before you, it's tough to have that before you launch, but somewhere between launch and production to start to have those relationships with distributors. And I think that has changed a lot over the years because we do have such a crowded marketplace now. I think it's tough for distributors to pick up games. They don't know which games are really going to take off. And so having a distribution plan in advance so that you can ship a certain number of games to different distributors, I think that's a lot less likely than it was back then, unfortunately. Jasmine says, what's your method of predicting how many games you have initially at each fulfillment center? So Joe has a formula. So my coworker Joe has a formula that he tweaks over time that kind of looks at historical data from Stonemaier Games to see how many copies of different things that we've sold in different regions. And we use that data to determine how many copies of each expansion or each game to send to each fulfillment center. And so we're kind of learning as we go. Like, for example, for the Viticulture Wine Crate, which we recently sent out, we realized through the Wine Crate that we sent too many to Europe. So our standard formula for Europe didn't really work for this bigger box. And our guess is that maybe there's there's a gross generalization, but the data seems to back it up to a certain extent, that people in Europe maybe have less shelf space. And so they're a little bit less interested in the big box concept. Again, that's a wide generalization, but we know from the data that normally when we send a product out, we sell a certain X number for each region, and that formula changed for the Wine Crate. So we're kind of learning to mix up that formula a little bit for different types of products. George says, I think fulfillment nowadays is much more complicated due to global shipping status and other things than it was, let's say, in 2013. It is more complicated, but I wouldn't say it's exponentially more complicated. No matter what, unless you were shipping something out of your garage or out of your house, which I would never recommend doing, you are eventually going to send a spreadsheet to a fulfillment center or sync them up to your e-commerce system, but probably a spreadsheet, probably a CSV file, and you're going to say, okay, this is what I need you to ship. And whether you're sending one of those spreadsheets or 4 different spreadsheets to Canada, the US, Australia, and Europe isn't that big of a difference. It does require a little bit more freight coordination, and freight shipping has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And like, you used to just be able to get a freight shipment and you'd pay X amount for a container, usually between $3,000 and $4,000, and it would show up about a month later. Now that time frame and that cost is very different now. Usually it's around 2 months, and the cost is between 5 and 7 times higher than that. We're still seeing containers around $25,000 to $30,000. So it's significantly higher than the $3,000 to $4,000 that we were spoiled with for so many years. The next topic I talk about in here is, so I talk about delivering on schedule. And I don't know if that's a topic that I wanted to go into all that much, but because I think we've seen this change a lot. Like back in the day, actually, I don't even know if I could say that, because the data back in the day was that only 16% of projects delivered based on their estimated delivery time. So on the project page where they said, okay, we're going to deliver this in December of 2016, only 16% of projects actually managed to pull that off. So even back then, like I think of this as more of a modern thing where, like, how many Kickstarter projects have you backed that have shown up based at the time where it was estimated to deliver? I can't think of. There are probably a few, but I really can't think of any off the top of my head. But that appears to be the case back in the day as well. I can say, though, when you manage to pull that off, when you manage to really plan ahead and go into the project with go into the campaign with a nearly complete product, and you're able to deliver based when you said you would, when you were hoping to, that can really delight backers. But I would say that's almost less important now. Like I don't know how everyone else is, but now for me, when a Kickstarter shows up at the door, it shows up. Like I'm not tracking like every little minute to see when it's going to be here. I'm kind of just excited when a package shows up at my door, and I think a lot less about that estimated delivery date. I still think it's important for creators to think about that and plan and schedule, but I don't know if it's quite as important for delighting backers as it was back in the day. But the concept I do talk about here is the importance of the project updates during the production and shipping process to keep backers informed and to let them know how things are coming along, even if there's bad news. And this is one thing that I really had to learn the hard way multiple times, was that I think maybe the human instinct when you have bad news is to wait until you have better news instead. But I think backers deserve better than that, honestly. I think they deserve to know when something isn't going as planned, so they can know that you're working on it and that you're aware of it and that you're going to share with them the truth as you're going through the truth, as you're going through those tough times. So I talk about that in this chapter, about the idea of transparent communication and how that can build goodwill and trust with your backers. Felix says, I have a list with all my backed Kickstarter campaigns and the updated delivery goals per game. Is that just me? I guess that we're different, Felix, but I completely respect that you have that you get excited about your campaigns in a different way than I do, or the campaigns that you're backing. So the last big topic here is Kickstarter exclusives, crowdfunding exclusives in general. And by this specifically, I'm referring to the true definition of this term, which is you offer something during the campaign that you will not offer after the campaign, except for maybe in the pledge manager. I think that is a reasonable time to continue to offer it. But there's things that you won't offer at conventions, that you won't offer on your web store afterwards, that you won't sell to retailers. That's the true definition of a Kickstarter exclusive. I think that's gotten obfuscated over the years and changed a little bit, where people hear that, but they think, okay, but really if there's like extra copies, you'll sell it afterward, or maybe if you have another Kickstarter campaign later, then you can bring in the Kickstarter exclusive stuff. That's a bit of a gray area. But and let me jump to the chase of what I think is the better way to do this, rather than have a Kickstarter exclusive. So say it's a whole expansion that you design, and you say, okay, the only time that you can get this is during this Kickstarter campaign. Rather than doing that, say, here is a little mini expansion that we are going to include for free during this campaign, and in the future, if we have extra copies or if it's really popular, we want to make more, then we will sell it. Then it will be something that we sell. I think that this is the kind of the promo system, and I think this promo system is so much better. It's so much more inclusive than the Kickstarter exclusive system, and yet it has all the perks of the Kickstarter exclusive system. It's giving people a reason to back now because they're getting this significant thing for free, instead of using fear of missing out as a marketing tactic and saying, okay, the only time that you can get this thing is right now. That's my heavy preference. I saw Board Game Co. Alex at Board Game Co. had a big video about this the other day. So I think Kickstarter exclusives are still a big part of the conversation for creators and backers. And his take on it, which I respect, was that he supports Kickstarter exclusives, that he thinks campaigns should continue to have them, because they give backers a reason to support the campaign now rather than later. But I think there are so many more reasons to entice backers to back the campaign, to make something awesome, basically. Make something really, really cool that they may not get later because it might be harder to get. It might be more expensive to get. Backers can help you build it during the campaign. I don't know. There's so many reasons, I think, for someone to back the campaign now. But if you are going to use mechanical and gameplay elements to entice backers to support the project now. I think the way to do it is not back yourself into a corner, basically. And the example I give in this book is Euphoria. Euphoria had some fancy resources in it that I called Kickstarter exclusives back in 2013, and I wanted to make them afterward. I found that people really wanted more of those resources who didn't back the original campaign. But I decided not to. I couldn't. I said that they were exclusive to Kickstarter. So I ended up making new resources. I just like kind of started over from scratch and make completely new resources. But I just think about that as a creator. Like, think about the possibility that your game really takes off and that people want, like a significant number of people want the thing, or even just a few people want that cool thing that you made. So it means that you've spent all this time and effort making this cool thing that you cannot make any more of because you made it exclusive. I just don't think that's a good long-term plan. And you can still have that short-term marketing approach tactic of saying, okay, we're making this cool thing. We don't even know if we'll make it later, but we might make it later. But right now is the time that for sure where you can get it, and where you can get it for free or at a really, really low cost as part of the campaign. In the future, if we do happen to make more, if we do, big if, we're going to sell it. It's going to cost a lot of money, and so you will have to buy it then if you want it. So now is the time to get it. That I think is so much better for the creator, and it's good for the backer still, and it's good for future customers. All right, let me back up. I've been rambling here for a while. Let me look back at So Terry says that Terry also does closely track Kickstarter estimated ship dates. Corey says, I feel like estimated shipping dates have been off so often that we've all just accepted that the listed date is made up. And when we get it, we'll get it. And I think that's definitely true for me, Corey. There were times where I would pay attention to that date a lot more. And now I'm just happy to get it. The only time I notice that a date is off or a little weird, and this hasn't happened for a few years now, but I remember a creator sending a project update saying, hey, we're really excited that our product is now in stores. This was in a project update. And I was like, well, that's odd, because I haven't gotten my copy yet. That's a little weird. Why would it show up in stores now? And I wouldn't even have thought about it otherwise. I think they could have probably snuck that by if they hadn't announced it in a project update. But where I was a little miffed at that point, because I was like, why would you proclaim that? Like that's something that generally that I wouldn't recommend doing anyway. But to announce it to backers and say, here's this thing that you backed that you were hoping to get first, and we already have it in stores. That was a little weird. That was a little bit of an edge case too. Melissa is talking about Kickstarter exclusives. She says, I won't do Kickstarter only stuff. I'm pretty much done with the whole Kickstarter thing anyway. Totally understand that, Melissa. I still get excited about crowdfunding campaigns, but I do look more and more towards things that have already been made and where the final version has been reviewed. I look more at that now. My favorite games are among those, I would say, more often than games that I've crowdfunded. There are exceptions to that, though. And Terry says, you'll never be able to please everyone. That's true. Yeah, definitely true. George says, you must somehow make the backers feel special. So I guess if you think about it, there should be other means of doing so besides Kickstarter exclusives. You just mentioned some of them, like expansions, good pricing on the product, things like that. Totally, yeah. And I list more in the chapter about those types of things. And I think a lot of it is engagement. So like the backers that maybe really are looking to feel special are the ones that are actively engaged in the campaign. They're the ones checking back on the campaign page every day to see what the new thing is or what the new topic is for that day. And for them, just engaging them and having a good time and listening to them and making the product better based on their advice. Engaging backers in the creative process, I think, can go a long way for those backers. There's also backers like me, where I look at the project page, I decide that I want it, and maybe I pay attention to updates a little bit, but I'm not super engaged as a backer anymore. I'm kind of just if I'm excited about it, I'll get it, and then I'll look forward to getting it a few years later. Like that's where I am right now as a backer. Garrett says, how do you feel about retailer exclusives? Greater Than Games just announced a light version of Spirit Island with Target exclusivity for 2 years. That's a long time. That's a great question, Garrett. I think that's tricky. I mean, it's an interesting strategy. They probably have a large commitment from Target to do that, and it is for a game that already exists. Like it's a different version of Spirit Island, but Spirit Island itself is already widely available from many retailers. But And I've even heard from retailers that they don't even mind Target exclusives all that much, timed exclusives, which has surprised me a little bit. But if I were a retailer and there was a popular game that we were eager to sell and we weren't allowed to sell it until Target had sold through their copies, I'd be a little miffed. However, I think maybe the big difference is that the audience of people who buy games from Target might be a little different than the loyal audience of an online or local game store. Might be a little bit different there. There's definitely some overlap, but maybe less than I normally thought. Chris says, I can't remember the last time that a creator deeply engaged with backers on any project that I back. Well, that's unfortunate, Chris. I've definitely seen that on various campaigns, but mostly through project updates, so maybe I haven't seen it in the comments all that much. Yeah, that's too bad. All right. Looks like I do have to wrap up. I have something I have to do in a few minutes, but okay, Chris says maybe just a poll here or there, but nothing truly creational. I think it depends on how far you want to go with that creation, that creative process. But just actively engaging and listening to backers, and even if it's something that you create that is made in the future rather than during the campaign, I think that's worthwhile having those conversations. Yeah. All right. I think I've got to take off today, but thank you so much for joining me for this conversation about how to make friends with your backers and potentially lose money through these types of mistakes that creators can sometimes make. And I'll be back in a few weeks with Chapter 8. What are we doing with Chapter 8? Chapter 8 is Go Small to Win Big. All right. We'll talk about Go Small to Win Big in a few weeks. Take care. I'll throw this up on YouTube in case you have any additional questions or thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks. Bye.